Before anyone gets up in arms at me for the title of this video saying they're not suing anyone, you're completely blowing this out of proportion, I want you to listen closely to specifically what Square Enix is saying with their new policy and ask yourself, why would a company create this policy in the first place? What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Smash JT, and Square Enix is looking to sue you, the gamer, for daring to speak out against anything you disagree with if it doesn't comfortably fit inside their nice, neat narrative. Hit that subscribe, give me a like, and check out smashjt.com for the full article breaking down how Square Enix has enacted a new policy and doubled down on DEI to push forward an agenda and ideology and ensure compliance. Square Enix, a company once nearly universally celebrated for their iconic franchises like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, among a slew of other mega banger hits, have now taken the controversial stance against gamers, anyone daring to criticize whatever direction they end up going. And while the failing gaming giant claims to value feedback, their recently published Group Customer Harassment Policy raises some serious concerns about whether they're actually, in reality, using legal threats as a weapon to silence dissent and discourage criticism. And I gotta be honest, from a personal standpoint here, it sounds awfully familiar to what's happening to me already with Alyssa Mercante suing me because she doesn't like how I covered the situation revolving around the game industry that she was once a part of. Almost feels like Square Enix is taking that same exact approach where they're like, yeah, you're only allowed to talk about us in a positive light, and if you start saying things we disagree with, we're gonna take you to task and take you to court. Square Enix believes that the feedback, comments, and requests received from our customers are essential to the advancement of our group's products and services. Therefore, we are committed to strive to apply your voice in improving our products and services. So the way they start this off is like, hey, yeah, say what you want to say, bring it to us. We love all the feedback, we respect you, and we want to hear more of it, as long as we ideologically agree with you. At the same time, there are instances where certain customers take actions directly or through our support centers or towards our group executives, employees, and partners who are involved in the creation and distribution of our group products and services that constitute customer harassment, such as denial of personality, violence, defamation, intimidation, advance notice of wrongdoing, advance notice of obstruction of business, harassment. Such actions do not only prevent our employees and partners from engaging in their work with a sense of security, but also causes disruptions to other customers. Square Enix will not tolerate harassment and will take action as necessary. Now, I want to be very clear with everyone here when I'm talking about the situation, because of course there's always that fringe minority in every walk of life where there's just the crazies that go way too far with stuff and obviously goes into levels of creepy that the law will take into their hands. But I need you to take a step back and look at the situation for what it is and ask yourself, why do they need a policy for this if the law is already there to apply to those crazies already? And then when you dive deeper into the words and verbiage they use here, it seems awfully similar to what the lawsuit I'm facing currently is right now. Square Enix's policy states that they believe feedback, comments, and requests received from our customers are essential to the advancement of their group products and services. However, the company simultaneously outlines actions that they deem as customer harassment, ranging from legitimate misconduct like violence or stalking to way more concerning and very subjective offenses like denial of personality and excessive pursuit or reprimand. The inclusion of these vague terms leaves a lot of room for interpretation. And the real concern that I have with all of this, misuse. Basically a way for a company to say, we don't like the way this person is talking about us, so we are going to apply to the fullest extent of the law a way to get them in legal trouble. Under the Group Customer Harassment Policy, it says, should Square Enix determine that an individual has engaged in an action against one of our employees or partners that exceeds socially acceptable behavior or is harmful, we reserve our right to cease providing support services or to refrain from providing our group's products and services. which is fair. You don't really need to put that in writing as a policy, though. It's pretty straightforward. If someone is going way above and beyond and being ridiculously over the top with you, you don't want to work with them because they're obviously psycho, you just don't work with them. You don't need to put this in a written policy, especially alongside the other words that he wrote that are far more ambiguous. Where such action is egregious or with malicious intent, Square Enix reserves its right to protect its employees and partners and to take legal action or criminal proceedings upon consulting the police and or lawyers. Actions which Square Enix considers customer harassment or to exceed socially acceptable behavior or is harmful include, but are not limited to, the following examples. And they go through a laundry list of things where some of them are obvious over the top, like acts of violence and violent behavior, to far more ambiguous things like defamation and slander, or abusive language. Like, it depends on how sensitive a person is to how far it's acceptable to go and how the words are used and what they're intended and how this can be twisted and morphed to be like you are the victim and playing the victim mentality as a customer service representative or someone that works at Square Enix to claim the victim, to use this policy to your advantage to make money. The policy states that they will cease providing support services, and then it escalates further by stating that Square Enix reserves the right to even pursue legal action or criminal proceedings against anybody that they consider with behavior that is unacceptable. And while legal protections for employees are undoubtedly important, this kind of sweeping declaration feels far more like a direct shot at gamers who dare try to criticize the company's direction and decisions, especially as of late with a overall failing company that is Square Enix, and gamers that want this game company to succeed, saying, we don't like the direction you guys are going with DEI, please come back to reality. They are now doubling down and tripling down on pushing DEI. Square Enix's move to try and codify measures is part of a larger trend among companies embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion. These policies are prioritizing protecting corporate reputations over actual genuine engagement with their own customers that care about the products that they're purchasing. And creating a policy like this creates an environment where people become afraid to give feedback for the sake of not wanting to be retaliated against from a mega corporation. So instead, they just start accepting the slop that gets thrown their way. The policies create an environment where literally any form of dissent, whether constructive or not, can and typically will be labeled as harassment, stifling an open forum discussion about any kind of quality of games and direction for the industry, and in the end, it all becomes about power and control of the narrative, which ultimately, let's be honest, is what Square Enix is trying to do here. The irony is pretty thick. Square Enix has publicly stated that the customer feedback is essential, yet now with this policy, it directly undermines their original claim. By lumping legitimate concerns and criticisms into the same exact category as actual harassment, they are now alienating the very audience that supported their success for decades up to this point. And then they start to wonder why people are starting to fight back and say, hold up, we are the customer. We are the ones that are purchasing your game. Don't attack us. We just want to purchase good games. The move isn't just about protecting employees from genuinely harmful behavior. It's about the potential misuse of legal threats to create a chilling effect on gamers approaching the hobby. Square Enix's policy here suggests that even requesting an apology or making an unreasonable demand could be grounds for punitive legal action. But then you gotta ask, who's determining what's unreasonable here? The company itself, of course, making this a dangerously subjective standard that Square Enix is now the arbiter of truth based off their own policy, saying we are going to enforce these things because it is now the letter of the law of our company. Why wouldn't they just use the law that exists right now that is overarching over everything? They don't really need a policy unless they're trying to scare you. This policy by Square Enix represents a deeply concerning shift in how some corporations have been choosing to interact with their own audience. By categorizing passionate feedback as harassment and threatening lawsuits against gamers deemed too offensive, Square Enix is now, by default, attacking their core audience and creating an environment of fear rather than trying to be fostering any sort sort of constructive feedback environment. If this approach gains any kind of traction, it will fundamentally alter the relationship between gamers and developers, silencing criticism and paving the way for unchecked corporate overreach. Like I said earlier, people just accepting the slop of these companies because they're too afraid to speak out against it. This isn't to excuse the outliers, which I'm sure there's people watching this video being like, oh, this isn't meant for you. They don't mean it against YouTubers. They're talking about the fringe minority, and that's really all it's limited to, which again, I go back to, why do you need a policy in place for this? Just use the law if someone is overreaching. You can just do that. This almost seems like they're pushing it forward to take advantage against people that aren't going past that line, and they're trying to push it for control and power. There are certainly obvious situations where legitimate harassment and attacks from fringe minority of people certainly exists, and you'll see that in all walks of life. The law is there for a reason, and Square Enix certainly shouldn't need any kind of policy to address these crazies. I've seen this pattern all too often before, and there's a reason why a company would create a policy in the first place would be to create more control and power for themselves. What's crazy about all of this is Square Enix's history was based off of very passionate fans in the first place, and by doing something like this, it's a direct shot at them. By doubling down on diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and including legal threats against gamers, the company themselves appears to be prioritizing their failing corporate image over any kind of meaningful connection with their audience. Whether intentional or not, their policy here sends a very clear message to everyone. Criticism is no longer welcome, and dissent comes at an extreme risk. The gaming industry and the community deserve way better than this kind of crap. Square Enix should reconsider their heavy-handed approach and strive for a more transparent and collaborative relationship with everyone. Otherwise, the legacy of their iconic games may soon be overshadowed by a reputation for silencing the voices that helped build them in the first place. Almost like they forgot how they got here. I don't know. It's kind of weird seeing the company failing, losing multi-million, over million, hundreds of millions of dollars over the past few years, and then seeing this happen. It's almost like, who's in charge over there? Who's making these decisions? Why do they feel like this is the right direction to go? Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. If you guys want more information, check out smashjt.com for the full article. I will link it in the description below. If you appreciate what I'm doing, hit that join button. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, you stay smashing. Smash